Hey guys, it's Katie, and I'm here today to do something that I've had in my head for quite some time, and it seems like some people on my channel might benefit from this or just be interested in it, and that is to dedicate an entire week to discussing and talking about the Realm of the Elderling series by Robin Hobb. As I said, I've had this in my head for quite some time, and I have different things planned all week. I was considering doing it for a month, but then I sat back and thought about it, and I'm like, I don't think I'm quite ready to do something like that yet. So I'm just dedicating a week to talking about this. And today's main theme is to give an overview of the series and general reading order of how to go about reading this. I'm hoping that this week caters not only to people who have been immersed in the world for a long time or have finished the series, but also to people that have never heard of it or have just heard me briefly talk about it. And hopefully I can win some of you guys over and you can scream at me as you go, because the more the merrier, honestly. So without further ado, I'm going to just jump right into what this series is about. So first things first, what's the Realm of the Elderlings about? The Realm of the Elderlings is an epic fantasy series comprised of 16 books, which can be broken down into 5 sub-series. There are 4 trilogies and 1 quartet. Now, you might be thinking, okay, cool, but what's it about? This is the story of our protagonist by the name of Fitz. Now, while Fitz does not make an appearance in every single one of the books, he is very central to every single aspect of the books, if that makes any sense. So you're probably wondering, who's Fitz? Well, Fitz is not only just our protagonist, but he's also a bastard, and he's brought to Buckkeep, which is a castle in the Six Duchies, where he is raised in courtly life, and he is, more importantly, trained to be a courtly assassin. The first trilogy, which I will talk about briefly in a moment, starts from when he's 5, but the majority of it takes place in his teen years. The second trilogy is not about Fitz at all. It follows a different cast of characters in a different part of the world called Bingtown. Now, Bingtown is a trading center. The third trilogy is called the Tawny Man Trilogy, and it picks up 15 years after the events of the first trilogy, so the Farseer Trilogy, and we're back with Fitz. It's very, very Fitz-centric again. Then we have the quartet, which is called the Rainwild Chronicles, which follows once again a new cast of characters in the Rainwild era region. And mostly what takes place in that chronicle quartet is this young cast of characters are trying to find these dragons a new home. That's just the gist. And finally, we have the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is once again back with Fitz and the Fool. It takes place 20 years after the events of the last book of the Tawny Man Trilogy, and it is the conclusion of the entire series, and a lot happens, and I can't really summarize it very well, but just, there's a lot. Okay, so the sub-series that I just told you is the order you're going to want to read them in, and I'm going to briefly talk about each one and explain which book goes where. So, the first trilogy I'm going to talk about today is the Farseer Trilogy, which is comprised of Assassin's Apprentice, which is the first book. You really want to start here. In fact, I'm going to insist that you start here. Despite other orders that you might hear, you're going to want to start with Assassin's Apprentice. This is the book where we meet Fitz and start Fitz's journey and start to get introduced to the world and the magic and a lot of the characters that become central players throughout the entire series. The book in the Farseer Trilogy is Royal Assassin, which mostly just follows the events from Assassin's Apprentice. And finally, we have Assassin's Quest, which is the third and final book of the Farseer Trilogy. But by no means is it the least important. As thick as this is, a lot happens, even though it's mostly a journey book. The next trilogy you're going to want to read is the Liveship Traitors Trilogy, which is the one that I told you takes place down in Bingtown and does not really follow Fitz at all. And this follows multiple POVs of a specific traitor family called the Vestrits. And the order you're going to read those in is Ship of Magic, which is the first one that really sets everything up. It begins with the quickening of the Vestrit family live ship and just kind of takes off from there. All of these things that were expected to happen, the opposite happens. And it's just kind of how each of these characters deal with those specific events. Then we have the Mad Ship, which takes place directly after the event of Ship of Magic and is just a phenomenal book. And then the last and final is Ship of Destiny, and it is the conclusion of the Liveship Traitors Trilogy. One other thing I'm going to say about this trilogy is that even though it is very, very separate from the Farseer books, it actually is not. It has quite a few events and things that happen in it that tie them together. This trilogy is phenomenal. It is leagues better than the Farseer Trilogy in my personal opinion, but anyway, it's a great time. Next is a book that I did not mention earlier because it's a novella, but it is crucial that you read it around, in my opinion, that you read it between the end of Liveship and the beginning of Tawny Man, and that is The Wilful Princess and the Piebald Prince. Now, this book takes place a long time before the beginning of the series at all, but it is important to understanding how some of the kinds of magic get put into the Farseer line. It's a very interesting story, and I really think it'll help enhance your experience with the Tawny Man Trilogy. Brings me to the third trilogy that you're going to want to read, and that is the Tawny Man Trilogy. And as I said before, this takes place 15 years after the events of Assassin's Quest, which is in the Farseer Trilogy, and it picks up with it's being called back to the castle because the royals have need of him, as always, and it takes him on another journey. One thing that this trilogy particularly shines with is the exploration of different relationships, and it's just quite a good trilogy. So the first book that we have in this trilogy is Fool's Errand, which begins with what I was saying before. Fitz is just chillin', and he's called back to courtly life because he's needed. And what unfolds is a grand time. But yeah, Fool's Errand's first. Then we have The Golden Fool, which follows, once again, the events of Fool's Errand and really expands on a lot of relationships. This book was really, really good, and I loved it. And then we have Fool's Fate, which if you talk to a lot of people will say that this is their favorite book. It's personally not mine, but there is a lot of really, really important and gut-wrenching things that start to happen. And while this book isn't my favorite, it's definitely up there. So that is the Tawny Man Trilogy. Next up, we have the Rainwild Chronicles, which is the quartet in this series. And it mostly follows a new cast of characters. This is the one that takes place in the Rainwilds, which is another region in this series. And it follows these teenagers, and once again, multiple POVs that are basically trying to find these dragons a new home. And there's a lot of teen angst that happens along the way. The first book that we have in the Rainwild Chronicle is Dragon Keeper, which begins our tale with following these four characters and kind of getting to know them and just kind of how they come together and all of the things that they go through on the way. And those four characters are Elise, Thymara, Cedric, and Leftrin. there are our main characters. We have other characters that are important that we meet along the way, but those are the 4 that we meet. And if you guys ultimately end up getting to this, come talk to me, because I am literally 100% Elise, and yeah, just every facet of her being is me. So that's a cool time. Then next we have Dragonhaven, which literally immediately follows the events after Dragonkeeper. Then we have City of Dragons, which is my favorite from this particular sub-series. It really starts to bring together all of the books that we've been reading from the very beginning, and just starts to tie them together. And it just really starts to explore some of the dragon lore, and it's just a phenomenal time. And then last but not least, we have Blood of Dragons, which is the conclusion of the Rainwild Quartet, and we get to see some really cool stuff happen. So that is the Rainwild Chronicles. And finally, we have the Fitz and the Fool Trilogy, which is the final sub-series and the conclusion of the overall series. So first we have Fool's Assassin, which is, once again, this series is a Fitz-centric series. This picks up 20 years later after the events of Fool's fate. And we start with a very introspective, retrospective period piece. That's kind of how I've been referring to it. Very, very different book from all of the others, but it is very interesting nonetheless. Plus, this is also the book we get introduced to a second POV of who I am not going to really tell you about, but they're very interesting, and they ultimately become very integral to this final sub-series. Then we have Fool's Quest, which honestly is my favorite book of the entire series. Of all of the 16 books, the short stories, the novellas, this is my favorite. A lot happens, a lot is explained, and just the pacing and the characterization is just perfectly spot on. It literally follows the events of the end of Fool's Assassin, and things just kind of go from there, and it's just such a well-written book, and I adore it with all of my heart. And finally, we have Assassin's Fate, which is the conclusion to the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, but it is also the conclusion to the entire series. And I thought it was a very, very fitting and very perfect ending. A lot of people find this book to be very polarizing, and I understand why. Some people love it, some people hate it. I tend to fall on the end of loving it, or at least really, really enjoying it, as I did think it was a perfect ending to the series. But a lot happens, and it is just the culmination of basically this entire series combined into this last giant tome, because it's quite large. Now, briefly, as I mentioned maybe before, there are some other works within this world. We have, I think, one other novella currently out, and then 6 short stories, or 5 short stories. 6 short stories, I think. And I'm just going to link all of them below, since the names, I always seem to forget one. So I'll put those in the description, along with just the general order you should read all of them in. I'll give you the overall order of how you should read the entire series. Not only just the 16 books, but how you should intersperse the short stories and novellas as well. And the last thing I'm going to briefly touch on is the fact that these books are very, very trigger warning heavy. I'm not going to include them all in this video. In fact, I'm not going to probably include any of them in this video because there are so many of them. So I'm going to try my best to break down the triggers per book in the description, or at least just list all of the possible ones that could come up at some point or another, because there are a lot. Anyway, that is my general overview of what this series is about and how you should read it. I hope I did an okay enough job and that you guys were able to follow it all okay. You will end up reading it, and if those of you who are on the fence about it are feeling a little bit better about it, and if you do end up reading it, definitely come talk to me, because as I said before, the more the merrier. This series is such a rich and vast series and world that you need to talk about it with someone as you're reading. Otherwise, you're just going to be struggling alone, and nobody wants that. Just trust me. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I am just going to tell you to expect more videos throughout the rest of the week about this. So I guess I'll just leave it here and just need to like, subscribe, comment, and follow me on social media. I have a Twitter and a Goodreads that are both linked below. And I've also got other social media sites, such as a second Twitter, which is Fandom, a Tumblr, which you should totally come and follow because I've got a lot of ROTE content on there, and my travel-centric Instagram, and you can request all of those if you'd like. And I will see you all, hopefully, again tomorrow with my next video for ROTE week. Okay, bye!